What's good, YouTube? It's me, your boy Scooter, back in another video. Today we're going to talk about how to beat the Orcust deck. Yep, I thought these guys were not going to be playable, and I made a video saying that I was frustrated with how power crept the game has been, where Orcusts are not very good, but people are proving me wrong in the comments. They're saying that this deck is actually somewhat relevant. There's other engines you can mix it with, like the Runic engine, the Sky Striker engine. There are apparently a lot of ways to play this deck, and I think people will be playing it. So I thought, without further ado, we should kind of get a refresher on how to beat this deck, since it's been a couple of years since it's been meta relevant. So without further ado, yeah, let's talk about how this deck functions. Well, as you guys know, we just got that one banned card, Harp Horror, back, and this card allows you to banish itself to special summon any Orcust monster from your deck except itself, but you're locked into dark monsters for the rest of the turn, which is a common trend that they share. Everything locks you into dark special summoning monsters. But they can easily just summon something like a Gursu, the Orcust Mech Knight, dump the Harp Horror, and then banish the Harp Horror to start specialing out their other Orcust monsters, including Symbol Skeleton, which allows you to revive an Orcust from the graveyard, as well as Orcust Nightmare. And then on their end board, they typically end with something along the lines of an IP Masquerena with a huge graveyard full of good stuff, fun stuff that they can leverage, like the Dingirsu, which can actually be brought back up the Symbol Skeleton, because they actually set up this field spell called Orchestrated Babble, which allows them to activate Orcust monster effects as quick effects, including the monster effects in the graveyard, which they can set up very easily using Galatea. They shuffle back a banished Orcust monster, and then they can set either that, or they can set Orcust Crescendo, which is a Solemn Judgment that they can search, which also has a recursive ability in the graveyard. So let's talk about hand traps to beat this deck. Well, starting with Ash Blossom, I think this one's a no-brainer, but you guys should definitely be ashing the Harp Horror. I also think there could be a potential argument to ash something like an Orchestrated Return if they do happen to play this, but the problem with that is you're generally discarding an Orcust, which means they're not negging any value, right? If you ash this, you're kind of going one for one on the trade, but I think there's a lot more value to probably hold it for the Harp Horror, because that's the main choke point where they're trying to go off into their other Orcust names, right? So if you're able to stop the Orcust Harp Horror from firing off, that means they're probably going to have to find other ways to start playing their combo. So that's just one thing to note. Another thing that might come up in the grind game is potentially Orcust Nightmare, because this allows them to banish it and Foolish a Dark Machine monster. They don't only have to Foolish Orcust names. There's actually a couple of other cards that can Foolish, including Gizmek Orochi. So if you have no way to deal with a level 8 body, rather, that can also start going off in the link plays, then potentially in the mid to late game, you could definitely ash Orcust Nightmare as well. That's something to consider. So yeah, this card is fine and dandy. You're stopping one of their main choke points in Harp Horror. Really quickly, if you guys aren't already subscribed to the channel, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button at the bottom. It'll go a long way to support the channel. Other than that, thanks a lot for tuning in. Next is NIBIRU. This is a card that's decently good against the deck. From what I've heard, actually, people are saying that you can now play around Nib in this deck if you play multiple copies of IP Masquerena, and you're still going to be able to end on the IP Masquerena plus a monster board with Dingirsu and Graveyard. So what they're going to do is they're going to be able to banish and special back the Dingirsu on your turn, send something non-targeting, and then use IP Masquerena's effect to link off into the SP Little Knight. So it's effectively 2 interruptions for 1. But I still think NIBIRU is somewhat good. It's not like they're always going to have the optimal hand to be able to play around it. And even if they do, we still get a free nib on the board. And, if they don't send it with Dingirsu, then we're kind of off to a good spot, because we get some value out of wasting their resources. And it's not like this card is always dead in the grind game either. If we're going second and they have to play through our board, then they're definitely going to have to start summoning more than 5 times. So Nib could definitely come in clutch, especially when you're using it on a lot of their one-up monsters in the extra deck. By the way, guys, this extra deck is really tight for the Orcust deck, because they have to play multiples of their engine pieces like Galatea and Dingirsu, meaning that they only have a couple of flex spots for cards like SP Little Knight and potentially their other card, Longursu, the Orcust Orchestrator. One thing to know with Longursu is that it points up and then to the left, so you should keep your most central monster, most important monster in the leftmost column, so the first zone in your monster zone. That means Longursu is not going to be able to send it during your turn. I mean, not that that's going to matter as much nowadays, because they do have a little SP Little Knight, which is probably just better, honestly, but, just for good reasons, for good measure, just put your monsters in the leftmost column if you can. Next is Shifter. I think this one's a no-brainer, but it's absolutely busted against a graveyard-reliant deck like this. Just drop the Shifter and pretty much watch them cry. So, yeah, if you guys can play Shifter in your deck, whether that's Kashtira, Flunderies, or whatever the heck else can side Shifter, then that's definitely an option against this deck, because they can't do a lot without that. I think they can maybe stretch into SP Little Knight, but it burns a lot of resources from their hand because they're not using their graveyard effects to the optimal stability, which is always a good thing. BYSTIALS are obviously insane against this deck for the sheer fact that, you know, everything's dark. Yeah, this is a dark deck, and there are a lot of targets you can hit. Obviously, the Harp Horror, as well as the other names, Orcust Nightmare. You can even chain it to the Symbol Skeleton, targeting like a Dingirsu in their graveyard, which is just so OP. And on top of all of that, there are other cards like Gizmek Orochi, which happen to be dark as well. Just hitting them, getting a body on board, being able to threaten sending something, baiting out an IP Masquerena by going into the battle phase or an SP Little Knight, swinging over it. Yeah, BYSTIALS are a no-brainer. I think they're insane against this deck. And then other cards that banish as well. DD Crow, this one's also a no-brainer, but it banishes a lot of their engines, banishes the Harp Horror, which is one of the main offenders. So if we're able to do that and get the ball rolling, you know, Harp Horror is only at 1, guys. It's not like 3 in the OCGs. So, you know, if you banish it, that means they're going to have to find a way to get it back. Otherwise, that is not going to resolve for the rest of the turn. So, yeah, DD Crow can definitely come in clutch. Ghost Spell is another one that's pretty effective, especially against their combo during your turn when they go Orcust Symbol Skeleton to try and resurrect the Dingirsu. You can just negate that. And if you catch them off really greedy where they do the wrong combo and only have the IP Masquerena on board, hoping to special summon back that Dingirsu to use as material, then you get double value out of the Ghost Spell. So that's just something to think about. Also, Ghost Spell is a defensive option. If you play a deck that's scared of getting cards banished yourself, you can use this against DD Crow or enemy BYSTIALS, stuff like that. Called by the Grave as well, right? So always good to note. Drone Lockbird's not very good against this deck because they don't do a lot of searching. Honestly, they might do a couple of cards to add like off Orchestrated Return, or if they start with like an M-SETI or something, because they do actually play the Horus engine in a lot of the builds, because you just send off of King's Sarcophagus for free, basically all of these Orcust monsters, and they're just free value in the graveyard, right? So that's just another thing I totally forgot to mention with the BYSTIAL, well, the DD Crow rather, you can banish, and then also the BYSTIALs and M-SETI. But you know, Drone Lockbird could be used against the M-SETI, could be used on resolution of Orchestrated Return, but overall it's just not a good card against this deck because they don't do a lot of adding. They're more like special summoning from the deck and just sending resources from the deck to the graveyard. So that's why this card is just like absolute crap against this deck in my opinion. BELLE, Ghost Mourner, and Impermanence. These cards are semi-decent against this deck. I mean, especially BELLE and Imperm, because you can stop their main starter, which happens to be Girsu, the Orcust Mech Knight. Without this effect resolving, that means that they're going to be very hard-pressed to get the monsters in the graveyard. They're probably going to have to bank on using an extender like King's Sarcophagus or the Horus engine, and it's very, very easy for you to deal with that. Also, on top of that, there are cards like Armageddon Knight that they also play, so BELLEing or Imperming that could just mean they pass their turn a lot of times. They don't have a lot of extenders. I know some people mentioned in the comments, Yassine was saying that they're playing Runic Engine in this deck, so that's just something else to be aware of. You know, if they are playing the Runic Engine, then you could definitely reserve it for something like a Hugin potentially as well, just to make sure that I don't get multiple draws. I mean, the Orcust Engine is pretty outdated. If you guys, like, if I'm honest with you, I don't think it's that powerful. It's probably better to stop the modernized engine that's comboed with this deck. If they're playing like a different mixture of Runics and Orcust, or Orcust and Sky Striker, maybe there's a higher impact engine that's not the Orcust side, which you want to stop. LANCEA is obviously a very, very powerful card against this deck because all of their effects have to banish. Nightmare has to banish, Harp Horror has to banish, Symbol Skeleton has to banish, even Galatea has to shuffle back a banished machine monster to set an Orcust Spire Trap directly from the deck. So if you're preventing that from happening, you know, that's probably a good thing. It means you're in a good spot. They might be able to still play somehow with extenders like the Horus cards and maybe end on a rank 8 or an SP Little Knight, but hey, they're not going to be doing any banishing that turn, which is like the entirety of the Orcust engine. So yeah, in my opinion, LANCEA is a pretty decent card. It's also a decent counter side against certain options like evenly matched when you have a board. So being able to go first and set up your board and then have the LANCEA and they go evenly, you not only shut off the evenly, but also the rest of the turn, it can come very clutch. And obviously Pot of Prosperity as well if you choose to shotgun it. Phantasmay is also a good one because you can use it on their Link Summon. So using it on the Link Summon and the Galatea means you might be able to draw into some higher impact hand traps like the BYSTIALs, DD Crows, Bells, Crows, Ashes. So yeah, this is another card that has a lot of utility against other Link decks in the format like Rescue Ace as well. So I definitely am a huge advocate of this card. It fixes your hand. It does a lot for the current metagame, especially how fast Yugioh is, and you definitely want a fixed hand without multiple cards that you can't use, or you want answers like board wipes or hand traps. So this is something else you guys can decide against them. Board breaker wise, evenly matched is something that could definitely work. I mean, they do have the IP Masquerena, but it kind of baits it out. And most importantly, you're getting rid of the Orchestrated Babel, which means they're not going to be able to use the effects from the graveyard. Either that or they leave the Babel up and then they're only left with like a Dingirsu effect in the graveyard, right? So they're not going to be able to IP Masquerena. So it's actually something that's kind of effective against this deck when they don't put up any Omni Gates. Unless I'm mistaken, there's some Baron that can put up a Baron de Fleur. This card is actually decently good in the form of evenly. Lightning Storm's not actually horrendous. You could just hit the spells and traps, obviously, just get rid of Orchestrated Babble, because once they get this field spell off the board, none of their effects in the graveyard are quick effects. They're going to have to kind of chain the effect of Symbol Skeleton in response to your Lightning Storm, bring back the Dingirsu, and then, you know, you kind of burn that Dingirsu effect, so that's kind of nice. Same thing with Harpie's Feather Duster. Just getting rid of the Babble. You guys are kind of seeing a trend here. Obviously, it's a lot difficult when they do have the Orcust Crescendo. That can make it hard, same with Evenly, but that means that they're going to have a way to search both this and the Babble, which is not easily done because Galatea is actually a hard once per turn. So it depends on how their combo is actually running, where they're able to search both. I don't think there's actually a current way to do it, unless I'm mistaken, guys. Let me know in the comments. And then last but not least, I think Cosmic Cyclone is an insane card against this deck as well, because you're just banishing the Orcust Babble, just getting it off the table. Like, you guys see a trend here, right? Going first, you can also use it against the Babble, and then it's just a flexible card against a lot of decks in the metagame, like against Purely, even Tearlaments, and like remaining decks that still play back row removal. Labyrinths, which is a huge one right now, if they're siding in like Skill Drain, which is like one of the last remaining floodgates in this game, then yeah, Cosmic definitely helps there. And then I suppose I should definitely mention Tactics, Talent, and also Thrust to an extent. These cards are decently alive against this deck, especially because you can ban out a lot of activations like IP Masquerena, SP Little Knight, card effects in the graveyard like Symbol Skeleton during your turn. So as soon as you start playing into their board, you can just wipe them out entirely with a card like Tactics, Talent, or Thrust by drawing cards or stealing and breaking their board or just ripping their hand, because like the end board that they have is just not very strong without a supplementary engine. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on these cards. I think they're generically good against the metagame as well, and I would definitely like to side deck these or main deck these, I think, for the upcoming format. So yeah, what do you guys think about Orcust as a whole? Let us know in the comments below. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Let me know if this deck is actually good or not, because I'm still a little confused. I mean, people are saying they're good, but I'm like, I can't really see it, but I guess time will tell. So yeah, we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.